I'm not here to follow opinions.
Not here to run the rat race.
Not here to please neighbors and relatives.
I am the writer of my story.
The maker of my own way.
And the creator of my own dream.
I am what I am.
And this is my story.
My story.
My madness.
Hi, my name is Leah Raphael Curtis, and I'm a dancer, choreographer, and a movement artist, and also an educator. And today I'm going to share my story, my madness, an exciting platform where I can share my journey of how I became where I am now. So I hope this story will inspire everyone who hears it to also continue to follow their path and see where it leads them, even if it's unusual or it's a little difficult, that it's important to just keep going. So I started dancing when I was only 4 years old. And I don't know if my mother realized when she took me to that dance class in Missoula, Montana, that it would take me so far, not just as a person and as an artist, but also across the world and across the globe. So from that very first class, I was hooked. I knew that dance was a way that I could express myself. And even as a child, I understood the medium of dance and the power of dance. From the very first performance I did, I was cast as the rat that died in the Nutcracker. And from that very small moment on stage where I fell over and my little legs were shaking up in the air, I knew this is where I want to be. I want to be on stage, and I want to be moving, and I want to be telling stories with movement. And so I continued. I kept going in class. Ballet, you start very young, and you have to really commit to it. Every day you have to go, you do your pliés, you do your tendus at the bar. It's always the same. It doesn't matter if you're 4 years old or you're 40 years old or you're 80 years old. As a ballet dancer, you always go to the bar. You always do the same exercises, and it really sets your foundation. And I understood very early on that when I danced, people would listen in a different way, that they would understand what I was saying, but I was using my body, so I didn't need to use my words. And movement is such a strong conductor of feelings and thoughts and energy. And once you understand that as a performing artist, when you're young, you just want more. So I was hooked. I had to keep dancing, where I could dance, how I could train more, how I could get better. And that was my entire childhood and adolescence. And I was very lucky because my parents along that journey with me were encouraging me and helping me find other opportunities. And it's also really important, who are your mentors? So even when you're a young dancer and you're studying, when you have those really seminal teachers that help lead you, where am I going? And they're giving you all of the tools that you need and all of the information, and getting to access that at a very young age really forms you. So I was very lucky that I had a teacher called Nancy White, and she ran the Mount Baker Schools of Ballet. And she showed me so much because she had been to New York, she had studied in New York, she had teachers from the Ballet Russe. And through that, I was able to be like, wow, dance isn't just here in Washington State. I'm going to go to New York, because that's where is the epic center of dance in the United States is in New York. Every dancer just wants to go to New York. So when I was 17 years old, I moved to New York to continue studying ballet. I was living in Harlem, and I was studying at Dance Theater of Harlem with some excellent teachers. It was, difficult and challenging and new, coming from a smaller city in the United States and then being in New York and getting to experience what does that mean at, such a young age. And the thing is about ballet, everybody thinks it's just beautiful and pink and pretty, and it's not. Ballet is very gritty. It requires you to show up every single day and to be ready to prove yourself, not only to what you can do in that class, but to your teachers. It's very competitive. A lot is asked of you physically, emotionally, and mentally. And even if you think about pointe shoes, you have these beautiful, shiny, pink shoes. And I can remember when I first got my pointe shoes, I was so excited about them, and I got them. I was 11 years old, and I kept looking at them and they were so pretty. And then you start dancing in them and your teacher said, well, when you start, we're not going to put anything inside that shoe because you need to feel the floor. And when you feel the floor and your feet start bleeding and your skin starts coming off and you're still young, you're like 11 or 12 years old, and it's really painful, but you have to smile and you have to make it look easy and graceful and gorgeous. And at the same time, you're in a lot of pain. So being able to access that kind of emotion while part of you hurts is, I think, part of dance's discipline. So every dancer knows you show up every day, you go to that studio, you do your practice, you do your rehearsal. You have to just keep going, whether it's for your teacher, it's for your director. If you're performing in a show, so many dancers are performing in pain. And it's just part of it, to do something so beautiful is also so painful. So from that moment, when you take those point shoes and you start dancing and you start having to do the repetition over and over again, each step has to be done. They say, how many times till it becomes muscle memory? I think it's at least 80 times until something is muscle memory. So you're continually repeating those same steps until you can reach some achievement of mastering that step. Now, what happens when that step goes on stage? Because on stage, there's a lot of variables. How do you feel that day? What does the floor feel like? What kind of energy are you getting from the audience? And then you have to be able to step onto that stage and be that performer, be that artist. And I think starting dance so young is really helpful because it gives you a lot of time to master all of those things. And it takes 10 years to master a classical form, whether it's ballet, whether it's classical music, and you have to give that time. So being able to start very young was very helpful for me to be able to understand the arc of what does it mean to be a dancer. So I was in New York and I was very much into my ballet studies. And then I was like, I'm doing ballet. Also, when I was at Dance Theatre Harlem, we studied African dance, we had tap. There was a lot of other forms that I was starting to understand. And then I said, you know what? Now I want to do modern dance because I don't think ballet is enough for me. I don't think that I can convey everything I want to convey through ballet. And also ballet is quite rigid in the body type, what your body has to look like, how the feet are. And I wasn't totally in that body type. And now it's much more inclusive than it used to be. But for me, it was something I was up against. So I started researching what were schools that I could go to in New York. And I got into Ailey. And Ailey is a modern dance school that's from a company started by Ailey. And there I had access to Horton technique, I had Graham technique, I had Dunham technique. And I was like, wow, there's so much more. And also I had great improvisation classes. And then I started to open my world beyond just ballet, but actually there's a whole world of kinds of dance that you can study and learn, and they can all form you more. So I was studying at Ailey, and then I was like, you know what? I want to go to Europe. Where can I go in Europe? So I applied for a program in London, and I got in. It was a degree program at London Studio Centre. And there I was able to study Cunningham technique. I studied Limon. I had different kinds. I was studying the RAD, which is the Royal Academy of Dancing ballet. Before that, I'd only done Vaganama and Balanchine. So it was a whole jazz. We had musical theater classes. We had to sing at this school. So it pushed me to have to find other ways to excel. And that's what being in a conservatory program really is. And part of this program I was in, we also had to study the theoretical side of dance. So we had lectures. We learned about dance history. We learned about anatomy. And we had examinations. And we had to kind of, okay, I'm a physical. I have all my physical classes. But then you have to go and sit in a lecture. And it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You just had lunch and you've been dancing all morning. And you have to absorb more information. So it was really challenging. And through this program, I was able to work with some excellent choreographers. and I was able to access some amazing teachers. And then when I was at the school, I met a dancer who was from India. He was a Bharatanatyam dancer. And he said, look, I want to take Bharatanatyam and I want to take ballet and I want to see where do we meet. And I was like, okay, let's try it. So he was choreographing and I was dancing, and suddenly there was all these different rhythmic structures. And I was like, how does this work? Like, I love it and I'm so interested in it, but I don't really know what I'm doing, but I want to know more. And I started seeing the work that they were doing, and I was really like, I need to know, what is Indian classical dance? What is it? Because I don't know what it is. I know Western classical dance. So from that point, when I was in London, I decided, you know what? I need to go to India, because if I go to India, am I really going to start to understand the Eastern side. I'd done the Western side, I did the European side, and now I'm going to go to India, and in India, I'm going to find out what is this other type of movement. And that's when I came to India. So I landed in India, and I landed in New Delhi. Never been to India before. I'd been like backpacking through Europe before that, so I had only a backpack. I didn't have any of the kind of clothes that I need, any of the stuff that I need, and I was just like, I want to study Indian classical dance. I had one friend, she connected me to her tour gurujis, so I started studying Kuchipudi, but simultaneously I also studied Kathak. And they're two very different forms, and now in hindsight, I don't think studying these two vastly different forms of Indian classical techniques at the same time was good for me, but I was very young and I was very hungry, and I just wanted the knowledge and I wanted to understand what is Indian classical dance. So I had a North Indian form, I had a South Indian form. The talas, the music was different, the teaching styles were slightly different, and suddenly I had all this information being thrown at me. And also, I don't think that they really understood my dance background and where I came from, because at this point, I'd done ballet, I'd done modern dance, and I moved into contemporary dance. Now, contemporary dance, a lot of people say, what is contemporary dance? Contemporary dance is like contemporary art, right? First, before you can break something, you need to understand where it comes from. So first you understand what it means to be classical. Now I know classical lines, how do I break those lines? How do I make it pedestrian? So contemporary dance is this umbrella term, and anything can become contemporary. So you could add hip hop, you could add, anything. Pedestrian movement is contemporary dance. Just being able to walk onto stage, which is the hardest thing to teach a dancer, is how do I walk on stage? Because it's very hard to walk on stage and appear natural and normal and just move, right? So that's what contemporary dance is. It was the postmodern movement. Modern movement gave birth to contemporary. And now I was here. I was a contemporary former ballet dancer studying Indian classical dance and trying to make my way in India in a place where there was not very many non-Indians. So I was like, on a spotlight all the time in New Delhi, like, oh, you're not from here, and what are you doing here, and why are you here? And just trying to get around, trying to get a rickshaw, trying to get to my Guruji's studio, which was an outdoor studio. So I'd never been in an outdoor studio before, and the floor was stone, and the parrots are flying, and it's hot, and in ballet we have a very standard structure of how we warm up and engage the body, and in Indian classical techniques it's very different. So you just go right into the movements. So how you warm up the body is very different. So even I remember at some point starting, I was doing my own warm up because I knew how I needed to warm up my body, and my Guruji would come and he would be like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, maybe my students should do this. Maybe they should also practice getting their leg up here, and maybe they should also do this stretch. And then we would be stretching together, and then he would be telling me about it. And one of the things that I loved when I came to India is that the continuation of what I already knew. So for me, dance had always been a spiritual practice. But when I came to India, it was so nice because here dance is a spiritual practice. So when you walk into your studio, you're walking into your temple. And that space is sacred. And what do you bring to that space and, that devotion? Because really, I'm devoted to dance. My entire life is devoted to dance. And it was so nice to come to India and see that connection between spirituality and dance and give that space. So I started into my journey of studying Indian classical dance and studying Kathak and kuchipudi at the same time, and they're different forms, and it's a lot of footwork. So I'd spend so much time in ballet training my feet, training my arches, the articulation of the feet, and suddenly those things didn't matter anymore. It was actually about like, how can you make the right sound with your foot when it hits the ground? How can you create those rhythmic structures with your feet? Having to tie on gunguroos instead of wearing point shoes or ballet shoes, I was putting gunguroos on, and then it was a bell, and how tight do you tie them, and what do you put them on, and how do you get the right sound? And they're heavy, they're uncomfortable. Also, it was all about sitting low. So in the other dance forms I did, we use our bend in our knee, our plie, but it takes us up and down. Now suddenly, that plie had to be very, very low, and I was supposed to stay down the whole time. So all the time it was always like, go lower, go lower, go lower. And I was like, I can't go lower. So it was a completely different thing for my brain to retrain my body. I spent so much time training my body to do these other forms of dance. I'd spent, over 10 years, and I was really formed. I was a professional dancer. And now suddenly I had to break all of that training. And I had to try to understand something that was completely different and asking very different things of me. And, your feet would swell. It would be so painful. There were days when I did too much study with my Guruji, and I couldn't walk up the stairs. I was like, I don't think I should have done that so much. And I was dancing on cement. I never danced on cement before. In the West, we have beautiful studios. We have sprung floors. It takes care of the body in a different way. Here in India, I don't think that information has reached here yet. It's starting to come, but it's still very slow. So nobody understands what kind of floor should I be dancing on, because previously in Indian classical, you were dancing on a packed mud, right? So that's okay, it absorbs the shock. Suddenly I'm dancing on cement, and what's being asked of me is hard. And I can remember the first time I was at this, quite a big dance festival that was hosted by my Guruji in Chennai, and they asked me to be the usher. So I wore a sari, and I took my job as an usher very seriously. And I was going and I was telling audience members, put your phones away. Because to me, it was like, you have to give your focus to the stage. And this is a really important part. And some of these things were different here in India. The customs were different. Culturally, it was different. So I had to figure out, how do I adjust to this? How do I fit in here? And part of me fitting in was like, well, you know what? I think I need to start my own company here. I think I need to work collectively with the other artists that I've met here, and we need to start making work together, and we need to tell our own stories. And the medium that we're going to use is through dance and through music. And I started a company called Delhi Dance Theater, and it was formed collectively with people from the US, people from England, and together we were able to start to work with different artists that we wanted to and tell different stories of different cultures and the culture here and where do we come from. And that was a really big turning point for me as an artist, was saying, you know what, we have something to say and we're going to create a platform to say these things. Part of my journey has also been as a teacher, and I think it's really important, if it's in you to teach, you should teach, because you want to impart all of this knowledge and this learning that I've done throughout my life. I want it to go somewhere. And I love teaching. I love spending time with people who are hungry for that knowledge and that information. And if you want to be a dancer, you have to be really hungry. You have to know that you're not going to achieve quickly. Dancing takes a very long time, and it's very difficult, and it requires you to show up every day and to be present and to be vulnerable. And that's what I always tell my students is you have to be vulnerable. You have to be prepared to go on stage and really bare your soul. And when you do that, your audience can feel it. And then your audience is going to connect with you. And that's one of the things that you really work with, is how dancing is so present-minded. So if you're performing or you're in class, you have to be absolutely in the moment. You can't be thinking, what is 8 counts ahead? What was 8 counts behind? You have to be right there in that present moment, and you have to be there, and you have to be accessing something that is greater than what you are. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about dance is it's spiritual. It's a meditative practice. And yes, it's physical. Yes, you have to train like an athlete. And yes, you have to be able to achieve those lines. But also, you have to be able to let it go and just be there. And being a dancer is always being a student. So for myself, I see myself as a student. I still show up. I still take class. I still want to learn. And I'm continually learning. And one of the things that I love about dance is that it never stops. So even if your body can't do what it could do when you were 16, there's something else now. And that's part of maturing, and all of these life experiences go into who you are as a dancer, as a performer, as a teacher. And it's just part of that continued journey of sharing and being the artist. So dance to me is always going to be part of me. It's in my soul, it's in my body. And being able to share that through performance, through teaching, through even talking about it is really part of my story. Because if I don't talk about it and I don't tell you what is dance, how will you know? So as a dancer, I think part of what we need to do is to tell our stories and to tell this is what it takes to become a dancer. And once you're a dancer, you're always a dancer. It never goes away. You will see dancers. I hope that I can be sitting in my chair, listening to music or not even needing music, and I can just be dancing in my mind. And that's also dance. And I can be creating in my mind. And that is the beauty of it. So it's a beautiful journey to be on. Thank you.